nervous because I'm here now.
Hey guys, welcome on to another episode of 410 Sports Talk. I'm James Haskell, along with my co-host Glenn Martin, and we are joined today by another Glenn Erby from the Eagles Wire. Thanks for coming on, Glenn. We're really excited to dig into this matchup with the Ravens and the Eagles. But before we get into questioning Glenn about the Eagles and about this matchup, we want to give you guys a moment to subscribe. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Check out our Patreon if you're interested in interacting with us more. Without any further ado, we'll kick it right off. Glenn Martin, now that I have to distinguish, I'll let you start it off, man.
Well, Glenn, thanks again for coming on with us. I really appreciate it. It's also nice to meet a fellow Glenn with two N's. That's always rare. But with the Eagles coming into this game at just 1-3-1, but they find themselves in second place in the NFC East, just a half game back of the division leading Cowboys, who unfortunately just lost Dak Prescott for the remainder of the season with the broken and dislocated ankle.
Correct.
So how confident are you with this very winnable division that the Eagles can bounce back and eventually win the NFC East?
Extremely confident, unfortunately. I think you have a fan base that would prefer to tank and chase guys like Micah Parsons or things of that nature. But with Dak Prescott being out, I was confident before Dak got hurt. With Dak getting hurt, prayers up to him. I think the winner of this division, whether it be the Cowboys or the Eagles, can win the division and make the playoffs with 6 wins. And that's 6 starting now. You would like for it to be 7 or 8, but I feel like 6 will get you in.
Wow. Man, that's saying something.
That's crazy.
It's insane. But one of the questions we had, the Eagles, of course, have some familiar names catching the ball when they're healthy. But right now, their leading pass rusher is a guy that wasn't on many people's radar when the season began. So tell us, Ravens fans, a little bit about Greg Ward, how he became the Eagles' leader in receptions early on, and what is the health status of veterans like Deshaun Jackson and Alshon Jeffrey?
Well, Ward's a crazy case because you have a guy who was on the practice squad for 3 years, constantly getting cut, things of that nature. And then last year you had a situation similar to this season where you have Alshon and Deshaun both go out early. He got the chance to play, and I guess late in the season, the 4-game stretch, he was the Eagles' best receiver. You had some questions after they selected Rager and other guys in the draft if he'd be able to come back. He's back. He's turned into their best player in the slot. I mean, besides Fulgham last week, but I mean, he's pretty good. He's reliable. He's another guy that Carson Wentz is comfortable with, and it's hilarious.
Yeah, I was going to say that's something that I've noticed. I feel like every quarterback has one guy on the roster that he's really comfortable with that just isn't a big name.
Right.
But somehow there's that chemistry. Obviously, he has tenure with the team. Who's the guy in Kansas City? Demarcus Robinson. I feel like there's a combination that him and Pat have, but he's not a big name, right? I feel like every guy has that. So happy to see Greg out there doing his thing. That's definitely exciting.
Yeah, it is. I mean, he's a really good player, I think, for Wentz, especially with Ward, Fulgham, and the young guys. I think it's something about these non-big name guys, and I don't know if it's Wentz being from North Dakota State and he not being a Power 5 guy, but he clicks with guys who work hard, who get it from the mud, and it's great to see.
Now, as far as the big name guys go, with like Deshaun and Alshon Jeffrey, what do you see as far as the timeline of them coming back?
They both practiced today in a limited capacity. As far as I know, Alshon may have been available for the Steelers had he not gotten sick last week. So, I mean, it's going to be an interesting week. Doug Peterson spoke this morning about the difficulties of integrating those two back in the lineup with guys like Ward and Fulgham. So it'll be an interesting week to see, but I expect both of them to play.
So I have one more follow-up question, Glenn. Bear with me here, both Glens. So I have a hunch about the reason that Eagles keep getting injured. So I'd like to know from an insider here. I've heard stories. I have a colleague of mine that is a diehard Eagles fan, grew up outside Philly. And so he really liked Andy Reid, but always knocked Andy for his regimen as far as like his emphasis on nutrition and stuff like that. Not himself, but like the team, right?
Definitely.
Not, like the post-practice ice cream and like the taco bars and stuff like that.
Right.
I've heard that Doug is the same way. Apparently there's like a post-practice ice cream like every day after practice. Is that a thing?
I mean, ice cream, water ice. The one thing I can tell you is they've they were a bit stricter and more in terms of fitness and training regimen and protein shakes and things like that. When Chip Kelly was here, you had someone that monitored their sleep at night. So even when they weren't in the building, there was always some type of sports science. That's not going on now. So I don't know if it has anything to do with Chip not being around, that sports science team not being around, but they've changed training staff, training members over the past few seasons, and the soft tissue injuries still occur. So I'm not really sure what goes on.
Interesting.
Yeah, it could be just a case of bad luck. But the Eagles,
Constantly.
maybe the Eagles' most important pass catchers might not even be in the wide receiver group. And of course,
Definitely.
I'm referring to their two excellent tight ends, Ertz and Dallas Goedert. But what is their health status approaching this game, and how important are those two guys to the Eagles' success?
Goddard's still out. He'll probably be out another 2 or 3 weeks. I'd assume he'll probably be back after the week 9 bye. Ertz is good. He's just struggling right now. I'm not sure if it's a contract thing or him and Wentz aren't clicking, but he's had like 4 catches for 17 yards in the past 2 games. So I think it's essential that he gets involved. He leads the team in targets. He's just not getting catchable targets. I don't know if that's more about the spacing or what, but I mean, Wentz is targeting him. He's just not getting him the ball.
So
Gotcha.
I want to go to the backfield. Oh, go ahead, Glenn.
Well, I was just going to talk. Yeah, I was going to mention the backfield with Miles Sanders. It's expected, really, when the season started, expected him to take on the load of the carries in Philly, and to this point, he is not disappointed. So, could you tell us what makes Miles Sanders so good, and how the Eagles take advantage of what he's good at?
I mean, he's an amazing pass catcher. He's an amazing runner. I think he's gotten better as a pass catcher. He's shifty in that Saquon Barkley mode, maybe not Saquon Barkley. So I think it's just more about Doug Peterson giving him the ball, allowing him to be a workhorse back. But I think he's up there in that McCaffrey. He's not McCaffrey or Kamara in terms of his ability as a pass catcher and a runner, but he's a special player and he's getting better.
So, obviously, in order to be a successful running back and a successful offense, you need to have a good offensive line. And with the Eagles, I remember this offseason, the offensive line had some key injuries, of course. And then, they weren't initially, I don't think, interested in really re-signing Jason Peters, and definitely not as a starter. They wanted him to kind of be an insurance guy.
Correct.
Ended up being a starter. And if I'm not mistaken, even he's out right now.
Correct.
So now their star right tackle, of course, Lane Johnson, is battling an ankle injury that could force him to miss some more time. I mean, what is the current status of the offensive line from a health and talent standpoint? Where are they getting their guys from, and what's your outlook on them?
I think from a health standpoint, the only healthy starter you have is Jason Kelce. I think from an outlook standpoint, and I wrote an article about it yesterday, just play with the young guys. Jack Driscoll's pretty good, whether he's at right tackle, guard, or left tackle. So he's a guy that you could build for in the future. Matt Pryor and Nate Herbig at left and right guard, respectively, haven't been that bad. Mulatto hasn't been that bad at left tackle. So Peters is still on injured reserve. Lane Johnson is day to day. From my expectation, they'll probably sit him for a week or 2. I don't think they'll, let it be known. But the young guys haven't played that well. They've missed some blocks, but for the most part, I think Driscoll last week when he entered the game had 17. Gave up no pressures on 17 or 18 snaps. So the line isn't necessarily the worst part of the team right now. So I feel like it's a young group, and it's a young group that, once you get the starters back and after the bye week, you now have depth at that position.
Yeah, it's a great point. One of the things I want to bring up, and that can be a blessing in disguise, like you're saying, because when the vets get healthy, you got guys that can come in and have had live action. But I think it's Mulatto is the guy that he's the Samoan guy, if I'm not mistaken. Grew up playing rugby.
Correct.
So I've had the opportunity to spend some time around some of these rugby players. I went to the University of Utah, and they pull a lot of rugby players and try and turn them into D1 football players.
Okay.
So how shocked were you by his raw size and athleticism? Forget being a football player, but as far as like the unique combination of being that size and having the mobility.
I think the mobility and the athleticism is probably the one thing that sticks out the most. It's taking him a minute, and I mean, he's not a natural football player, but for a guy to be that big and to have that good of feet and that fluid on the outside, he's impressive. And whether it be, I feel like he's played well enough that he, at this point, is really a threat to Andre Dillard at left tackle, like forget Jason Peters. We might have a situation where they don't even bring him back. But if you're talking about a team that has salary cap issues and that may need to move some guys or do some other things, you now have a guy in Mulatto that's athletic and as talented as your guy and Ronnie Stanley, and cheaper. So it's something that I think the Eagles will have to look at going forward.
Yeah, I know when they picked him up late, that was a great value pick, and that's interesting to see that he can actually have the potential of turning into a full-time starter. I mean, that's great
left
value
tackle.
there.
Yeah.
Probably Howie Roseman's best pick over the last 4 years, if you want to talk about it.
Yeah, it's a great point.
Well, staying in the trenches, but flipping to the other side of the ball, as a Ravens fan, the biggest area of concern for me going into this week's matchup is that defensive front for the Eagles. And with the offensive line in Baltimore not playing up to their expectations so far, how concerned should Ravens fans when you think Brandon Graham, Josh Sweat, Malik Jackson, Derek Barnett, Fletcher Cox? I mean, they got a ton of guys, and they're coming to look to expose some weaknesses up front for the Ravens.
Yeah, they've played pretty well up until last week. They led the league in sacks. I think the Steelers overtook them after the 5 sacks they had against Wentz, but they're pretty well. Hargrave is starting to get into the flow, so he's starting to bring that one gap potential that he showed with the Steelers. Graham is back. Vinny Curry's back. Josh Sweat has played amazing. So it's a good group. I think it helps that you have Slay and other guys in the secondary. So they're finally starting, I guess, to mesh off of each other. So you have a pass rush that doesn't have to rush forever, and you have cornerbacks who don't have to cover forever. So things are blending well. That's not necessarily the problem on the defense. I think the problem on the defense is somewhere in the middle with the linebackers. But in terms of the pass rush, the pressure they get, they're top notch right now.
Well, you just mentioned the back end, and I wanted to touch on that because I think the biggest move for the Eagles in the offseason was the acquisition of Darius Slay. How has that trade worked out so far from an insider's perspective? And also, how's the rest of that secondary looking coming into this matchup?
I think outstanding from the terms. I mean, last week he gave up a catch or two and some yards to Claypool, and that's fine. I think everybody did last week. But in terms of how he matched up with McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, I think it's the first time in years where you had a guy where against the Rams, the Washingtons, different teams like that, you now have a cornerback that you could put on one guy, hopefully take him out of the equation. And I think his swagger, his confidence has rubbed off on the other guys. So his approach to the game, I think as a whole, the secondary has gotten better. They can improve, and they'll probably improve as they continue to get healthy. But from a standpoint of bringing him in, it was a no-brainer. He's worth the money. He's worth the extension he got, and it should be a blessing going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. We here in Baltimore can know how much of a difference good cornerback play can make.
Yeah, you have two monsters.
Yeah, we're super. We go to bed counting our blessings at night for that. But most definitely. So we've done everything but talk about. I think it's funny, but we saved the best. We kind of worked it in a roundabout way. Saved the best for last year, if you will. That's right. We want to talk about old Carson Wentz, Pennsylvania himself. For whatever reason, he's one of the most polarizing players in the NFL. So I'm still wondering if the Eagles might be better off with Nick Foles under center. What are your
hearing
thoughts
about that? But
what are your thoughts on Wentz this season and then going forward? So, not only now, but also for the future.
I'm confident in him. I think this is a city where I don't know if they're spoiled or they're entitled. I like to say that Philadelphia is a city that likes to eat their own. So, I mean, I love him. I love him as a player, as a man, as a leader. I think, with no training camp, no OTAs, different things like that, it's taken him a minute. But you have to understand, I think there was a stat last week, since he's came into the league, he's thrown the ball to, I think, 25 different guys. And he's since 2017, I think he's not had the same wide receiver group line up for a game. So I think last week you showed Fulgham makes him comfortable when he has a guy that's comfortable. He'll try to fit the ball in tight spots, and he's trying to do that now. I think he's not pressing as much. I think the first 2 weeks, he's essentially trying to win a Super Bowl on every throw. And when you constantly hear about Foles and different things like that, I think he has moments where he presses and he tries too hard. But, I mean, he's just a gritty guy. That's how he plays. He's going to hold the ball too long. He's going to fumble occasionally, but then he's going to make amazing throws or toss some guys off of him as well. So I think you take what you get. I think the Eagles have made the right decision. Once he has the weapons around him, he'll be fine. He's the least of the problems on this team.
Well, it's interesting. It's glad to hear. I feel like, like I mentioned in the question, some people are so up and down about him.
Always.
Not that it's comparable, but I feel like in Baltimore, when Joe Flacco was our quarterback, people either loved or they hated Joe, right? Like I'm not comparing their talent, but the same idea here, was kind of what was going on. Now, something interesting happened, of course, in the offseason, second round. You guys took a guy named Jalen Hurts, no stranger to the spotlight. So, a follow up to that would be, were you scratching your head when you did that? And then are there fans already calling for him to get a chance based on the fact that Wentz is kind of polarizing as a player?
Definitely a head scratching move, and definitely every day since he's been drafted, Wentz should be benched. I mean, if you have to see some of the groups and some of the hot takes and some of the comments. Wentz should be benched. He should be traded for this guy. I do have people that don't understand salary cap, that don't understand his extension hasn't even started yet. So it's definitely frustrating. That adds to his frustration. I think that adds to why you see him pressing at times. Hurts is a good guy. He's a good locker room guy. But there are plenty of players you could have took at number 53, regardless of how bad you want to solidify your backup position or not.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was a little bit puzzling, but I guess we'll wait and see how they end up using him ultimately. But it's moving on to this matchup specifically, this game coming up. I'm trying to figure out what worries you most, if you're an Eagles fan or Eagles player. So I want to do a little fill in the blank game here. So fill in the blank. If the Ravens are able to do blank, they win this game easily.
Target Mark Andrews. We can't cover a tight end and save our lives. It's not even about wide receivers. I'm not really worried about them running the ball. If we can't do anything with Mark Andrews, hopefully Will Parks can come back, and not to cut you off, but if it's Nate Gary on Mark Andrews all day, this game is over before it starts.
Well, I'll take that matchup. Not gonna lie, I'll take that. That's just a tall task to slow down a guy like Mark Andrews. Now, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say they haven't come close to stopping any tight end, and he's one of the premier ones in the league. So easily, if he goes off, 5-6 catches, a couple of touchdowns, I don't even think it's a close game.
Man, so I want to, you kind of answered the next question with your last answer, but what is it that the Eagles need to do specifically? Obviously they need to stop Mark Andrews, but what else do you see them having to do in order to come out with a victory?
Well, I think from a defensive perspective, the injuries, especially in the secondary, have, I guess, stalled what Schwartz wants to do. So it's not necessarily his system or his scheme. Nate Jerry can't necessarily be your dime or your nickel guy. So once the Eagles can, if Will Parks can come back and you have a guy who can cover tight ends or a guy who can cover athletic big receivers, that takes away some of your fear. So I think for them, it's about establishing a running game against the Baltimore defense. Wentz can't stand back and pass the ball 50 times against that defense, not against that secondary. So quick screens, establishing Miles, giving them an opportunity to play, keeping Lamar off the field. And you'll have this, I think you have the same chance that you had last Sunday in Pittsburgh.
Well, I've always been curious, and we always like to do this when we have somebody out from another team on. What is your opinion and your take on Lamar Jackson as a player and going, not just now, but also going forward? And yeah, just what are your feelings about the offense that they use him in?
I love him. I mean, I think, we get caught up too much in the Breezes and the Tom Brady's of the world. I like the fact that he can run, he can escape the pocket. I like his arm. I like the fact that he's gotten better as a passer over the years. I think he'll continue to get better. I think, we can't look at his QBR or his passer rating. It's about wins and different things like that. And I think when we get into the playoffs, you guys have a different expectation and you'll need to see something different. But in terms of the way he plays, I love the way Harbaugh approaches the game. I love the way that he allows him to be himself. He doesn't stop him from running. They have different options in the offense. So you guys are fine from a quarterback perspective.
Yeah, glad to hear that one for sure. Yeah, because we're super high on Lamar. I will say that Glenn, I think was the first guy that was talking last year, talking about Lamar would be the MVP race. And so we've been really high on Lamar, since he came in. So that's definitely something exciting. Now, what we want to know from you, I don't know if you've made this public or not yet, but we would like to know your prediction of the game as far as the result, who wins and who loses, and if you have a score.
Eagles need it. I don't necessarily think it's must win, but I feel like, and I've said over the past few weeks, the margin for error, they blew that over the first 3 weeks, but they need it. They are playing better. I feel like if you get Alshon Jeffrey, regardless of if Deshaun plays or not, if Alshon comes back, I say Eagles 21-17, just because of home, some fans in the stadium for the first time this season, must win, offense is gelling. Your offense is still trying to figure out its identity. Early game. By the time you guys wake up, we're out of here with the win.
Wow. Okay. Well, this is a first, Jimbo. I think this, Glenn, I think you're the first one to pick the Ravens to lose. Even the gentleman we had on that covers the Chiefs picked the Ravens to win. So this is a landmark. I'm writing it down, Glenn, because we might have to call you back up here.
Anytime. Appreciate it.
But before we let you go, and thanks again for coming on, but let the fans know where they can find you and what you're working on.
It's Eagles every day. You can find me on Twitter at the Cover 2 NFL. I don't have Instagram, Facebook, the Cover 2 NFL as well. Anything Eagles Wire or USA Today Wire related, you'll find me on there.
Awesome, man. Well, we'll be sure to put the description or in our description, we'll be sure to put your link to your Twitter and then also to your USA Today Eagles Wire page as well. So that way, if you guys are any of you guys are interested in that, you can feel free to check it out. Thanks, Glenn, for coming on again. And
appreciate you guys for having me.
Yeah, man.
Thank
have
you.
a good
Appreciate
one.
You. Bless.